What's going on, everybody? This is the Daily Fantasy Show brought to you by DFO. It is Wednesday, October 19th. Adam is still off. I promise he'll be back next week and we'll have our Tinder segment because I know that's exactly why you tuned in. Last night was a weird one. If you had Mike Camilleri, 2 goals, 2 assists, I think 11.5 DK points, and Adrian Kempe with the hat trick and an assist for 15.5. If you had them in the pool, you probably won a lot of money. They definitely were the play last night, and they were extremely low owned, which, is not surprising. I thought about playing Camilleri, but I didn't. Kempe, I had none. So, can I touch on Brock Bozier tonight? Yes, I will touch on Brock Bozier tonight. They're actually the first game I'm going to talk about. So, let's hop into the 9-game slate we have tonight. First game of the night, we have the Vancouver Canucks traveling to Boston to face the Bruins. Patrice Bergeron is a game-time decision. If he plays, I'll probably have some interest in Boston 1. Boston 2 is also a tad bit interesting to me. However, if Bergeron's out, I'm probably going to go Boston 2. Or if I'm in a full line stack, I'm going to go Boston 2. I'll probably not. I'll go Bergeron and Marchand and Krug if he's in on Boston 1. Because they're expensive, and I think there are better options tonight. But Bergeron still hasn't played this year, 6,400. You know what you're getting with him as long as he's healthy. Marchand's expensive, 7,600. I think I'd rather use Pastrnak at 6,900. And he's on Boston 2 anyway, so that's all I'll do. Rask got hurt in practice yesterday, so it looks like Anton Khudobin is in for Boston, 7,700. I don't really have any interest in him. It's not because I think Vancouver is going to score a ton of goals. It's because I just don't think Vancouver is going to generate a lot of shots tonight. That being said, I'm going to fade Khudobin just because 7,700 is too much for him. That being said, it depends on the lines. Their most expensive center tonight is Bo Horvat at 3,900, which is just ridiculous. Brock Bozier is the most expensive skater at 4,200 tonight. He's getting power play time. I mean, if you need some salary space, Vancouver's not one of my top options. I don't even think it's really up there for me at all. They're one of my least favorite options on the slate, to be honest with you. But if you need someone on the power play and you need, a couple spots to save up space, I'd use Bozier at 4,200, Del Zotto at 3,700. That's only 7,900, and it frees up some space for you. Other than that, I don't really have interest in the Canucks tonight. Anders Nielsen, 6,900. He's coming off a 30 save shutout, something like that. Not really interested there. I think he might garner some ownership because of the recency bias off his shutout, but I'm not interested. So let's move on to the second game of the night. We have the New York Islanders, not really traveling anywhere, but they're going to play the Rangers tonight at the Garden. Now, this is an interesting game for me. I like both Rangers and the Islanders top line. Just like last game, against the Penguins, the Islanders are very poor defensively, and even if the Zibanejad line is up against the Tavares line, which it's probably going to be, I still like New York 1, Zibanejad, Zuccarello, and Nash, because like Tavares, even at even strength, is that line is still pretty poor defensively. If I'm going to full stack them and you want to, make it the 4-man stack, obviously Shattenkirk is the play to the guy on the blue line for me there. Also, if you're not stacking Rangers and you need a power play quarterback, Tony DeAngelo, 3,400, second power play. It's a good spot there. I mean, he doesn't really correlate with the top line, but he does get power play minutes. On the flip side, New York Islanders, you saw what the Penguins did. I like the top line of the Islanders, Tavares, Lee, and Eberle. They've struggled out of the gate this season. I think they're 0 for 21 on the power play, something ridiculous like that. They're coming back from a West Coast swing. I still want exposure to them because the Rangers are poor defensively. Henrik Lundqvist doesn't look like the Henrik Lundqvist of old. I always say all the Islander defenders are in play because you never know where it's coming from. Leddy looks like he's on the top power play unit, 4,300. And then you have, what's his name? I believe Ryan Pulak is in tonight, 2,700. He's an interesting punt play. I'd consider that there. Goalies, I don't have much interest in this game at all. I don't want Henrik Lundqvist. I don't want Halak. Lundqvist is 7,700. He's coming off not all the goals were on him last game against the Penguins. He gave up 5, but the one to tie the game to send it overtime was really soft. That was bad. I'm still in a wait and see on him. The Rangers are 1-5-1. At 7,700, I'm going to fade him. And Halak, I believe, is starting, 7,200. The Rangers did put up 4 goals. The Penguins are terrible defensively, but so are the Islanders. No, because I have no interest in Halak because the Rangers really should have won that game the other night. Rick Nash was a monster, even though he didn't put up any points. He had 6 really good scoring chances. He hit the post 3 times. I feel like he got pretty unlucky, and I'm not going to, say he's going to score, but if he played like he did the other night, he should get on the scoreboard. So let's go to the next game. We have the Nashville Predators traveling to Philadelphia to face the Flyers. I feel like people are just going to, off the past 2 games, stack the Flyers, but they're not one of my favorite stacks tonight. They are fairly cheap to stack. They're 17,400, which does give me some interest. Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, and Jacob Voracek. The one thing I will say about that, though, is their shooting percentage is really high on the season, like really high. So if you want to chase points, okay, you can do it. They've been very good. They're middle of the road for me. There's other top options, like Dallas, Edmonton, Rangers, like that kind of stuff. We'll get into some of those later. I will say the second line for the Flyers, I do have some interest. They're very cheap. They're 15,000 a stack. Valtteri Filppula, I'm not a huge fan of his, but he did take over the spot for Braden Shen on the power play. And you saw what Braden Shen did on the power play last year for them. He scored a bunch of goals. So, And Simmons is the net front, and he always gets, the hard-working goals down there on the power play. So if you want to go with them and, use Ghost or even Provorov, I can see going there because they will open up some salary, and they're one of my favorite secondary lines, I believe. Yeah, they're one of my favorite secondary lines tonight. In net, Neuwirth is starting again, I believe. Yeah. And he's 7,800. I didn't want anything to do with him because he was 8,200 last game, and that bit me. That's fine, because I if you've watched this show before, I'm not a big proponent of spending up for a goalie in GBP cash. Of course, it's fine. You want the goalies with the high floors. 7,800, I think could be a solid. I think you're going to get him at low ownership tonight, Neuwirth, because I feel like people are just going to jump on Nashville tonight after their the top line after their performance last game. I can see it. So, obviously, let's talk about Nashville for a second. I mean, their top line of Ryan Johansson, Victor Arvidsson, and Philip Forsberg, they were very good last game. Roman Josi is back on the blue line. If you want to go there, he's probably my preferred play. PK Subban is $100 cheaper. If you have if you don't need to save the $100, Josi is my preferred play. If you need the $100, Subban is a good play for me there. I'm probably not going. I mean, you can use Nashville tonight, and I'm not going to talk you off of it, but they're not one of my top plays. They're a tad expensive, 18,600. I mean, there's more expensive lines, obviously. They're kind of middle of the pack for me, especially if they're going to have ownership. If I'm making 20 lineups, I'll maybe have like 10-15% exposure to them as a full line with a stack with Josi or Subban. Pecorines, 7,300. He's probably going to start tonight. To me, that seems too cheap. Cash, I probably avoid him just because the Flyers have been scoring a lot recently. But in GPPs, I could see it as a solid GPP play. So let's move on to the fourth game of the night. We have Tampa Bay Lightning traveling to Columbus to face the Blue Jackets. The top line for the Lightning has been ridiculous. I think they kind of go overlooked a bit tonight, considering that you have Edmonton, you have Dallas, people are going to go to Nashville. I kind of like their spot tonight. If you read Adam's line matching article up on Daily Faceoff, it looks like Columbus 2 will be facing off against the Stamkos line, Stamkos, Kucherov. It looks like they're going to be on them pretty much the whole night. I do want some exposure to Tampa Bay. I like both sides of this game. If I know for sure that Tampa Bay is going to be lower owned, I'm going to up the exposure. If I think they're going to be a little bit chalky, which we've had a debate about today, we're not really sure where they're going to fall on the ownership line. I still want some exposure to them because they've been really hot. Kucherov's been insane. Like I said it last year. If they made the playoffs, he should have been in the Hart conversation. If Tampa Bay makes the playoffs and he produces like he has been, he's one of the best players in the NHL. Definitely one of the best scorers. I want some exposure there. If you're going to use them, if you can fit Hedman 5,900, go for it. If you can't, Sergachev 3,400. They're 20,100 to stack on DraftKings. It's a little pricey, but there are some secondary lines that you can definitely take advantage of. I really don't have too much interest in the depth lines. If you want to use Point as a one-off, sure. Tyler Johnson's 3,700. If you want to use him as a one-off, he's on the power play. Definitely could see that. I mean, I think he's a pretty solid cash game play if you need salary. Vasi is probably gonna get the start. 7,300. He's been solid. Again, 7,300. I think in a GPP, push come to shove, I think I prefer Rene because Columbus is one of my favorite plays tonight, and I think they're definitely going to go overlooked. But if you're not using Columbus, if you want to use Vasi, I'm not going to talk you off of it just because he's been solid all season, and the Lightning have been winning. But let's get to Columbus. If Tampa Bay 2 is up, if Columbus 2 is up against the top line of Tampa Bay, that means the top line of Columbus is going to get a depth line for Tampa Bay, probably the Point line or the Johnson line, either or. I definitely want one of my top exposures to be Columbus 1. They're 18,700 to full stack. That's kind of moderately expensive. It's not crazy. You can definitely fit them in pretty easily, which is Wenberg, Panarin, and Atkinson. If you're going to use them and you want a four-man stack, if you can fit Zach Werenski at 5,600, definitely go for it. I mean, it depends on the secondary line they're using. If you can't fit him in Seth Jones 4,700, not a bad secondary option. And in goal, if you're not using the Lightning, Bob has been great. He's been one of the better goalies all season. He's 7,600. If you're going to tell me that the Lightning are going to be higher owned, I want some exposure to Bob. If you're going to tell me the Lightning are going to be lower owned, I still want some exposure to Bob, but not as much. For 7,600, I think you got to have a little bit just in GPPs just because of what he's been doing this season. Again, Tampa Bay 1's one of the best lines in the NHL right now. So, he could give up a couple goals. But, if you're going to use Columbus, I think you're going to use Bob. That makes sense to me. So let's move on to the next game of the night. We have the New Jersey Devils traveling to Ottawa to face Adams Senators. This game, Ottawa with their lines. Again, they're all mixed up. Their power play is over 3 even strength lines, which is very annoying. But again, depth lines, I think Ottawa 3 is a great spot to save some salary. They're cheap. You let you fit Erik Karlsson in there if you want to use Ottawa 3. I think it's Pajot and Hoffman. Those are the two I'd use with Karlsson. Any of the Ottawa lines are pretty cheap, but that's my preferred play. The third line with Pajot and Hoffman allows you to fit Karlsson, who is 6,700, same price as last game. It's still cheap for him. He's still coming back from injury, but he will see increased ice time. If you want to use the Turris line, you want to use the Brassard line, just make sure to check the lines because they always mix up their lines. But, I do have interest in all 3 lines for Ottawa tonight. It's just annoying because they're all over the place on the power play. I want the line that correlates the most on the power play, you want to use Hoffman as a single bullet. Definitely a viable option. Craig Anderson tonight in net for the Senators, 7,700. I do have some interest, moderately. I mean, I think the top line for the Devils is in a pretty good spot tonight, the Taylor Hall line. I mean, I'm a big Taylor Hall guy. You saw what they did with last game with Drew Stafford, almost the Drew hat trick Stafford, and Nico Heischer, who almost scored I think he had 3 assists, and he almost scored his first NHL goal. But I do like the NJ ones tonight, or the Devils won. Again, Devils 2, they're very cheap. Henrique, Palmieri, and Johansson. I was more on them than New Jersey 1 last game. I think it's flipped for me. This time, my preferred play in this game is New Jersey 1. On defense, Will Butcher, he has 9 assists in his first, 5 or 6 games. First rookie to do that. He's up to 4,000 now. That's not going to crush you if you lock him in if you're using the Devils. Severson, 3,100. If he's on power play too, check it out. Definitely has a decent punt play. Corey Schneider, 7,500. GPP. Not really interested in him in cash. So we'll move on to the next game of the night. We have the Edmonton Oilers traveling to Chicago to face the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks are on a back-to-back after losing to the Blues last night, 5-2. Looks like Anton Forsberg is going to be in net, which is going to pump McDavid's ownership, which is kind of annoying because Edmonton is even with McDavid is only 17,300 to stack on DraftKings. It's McDavid, Yamamoto, and Maroon, and they're outside of Dallas 1. From at least take ownership out of it, they're probably my favorite play tonight. The problem is the ownership is going to be very high, I believe. Maybe just on McDavid alone, or McDavid, Yamamoto, and Clefbaum, those 3. But if you full stack the line with Clefbaum, you might get them at a combined lower ownership than if you just single bullet McDavid. He's probably going to be, I don't know, if I had to take a guess, probably around 20% tonight. But they're still my preferred play. Cash, McDavid is a lock for me. If you want to fade them in GPPs, just because of ownership, I can see that, fading them and hope Chicago contains them. They're going to see the Tays line all night. Tays is a solid defensive player, but McDavid's McDavid. It's kind of hard to contain him. Edmonton 2s, they're very cheap, 12,000. What are they? 12,900, which is Nugent Hopkins, Lucic, and Strome. Strome is coming into his own. He's finally getting some points on the board. I definitely can see they're going to avoid the Tays line, facing a backup. If you want exposure to the Edmonton game, but you don't want the high ownership of McDavid, Edmonton 2 is definitely a viable option tonight. And a net, Cam Talbot, 7,100. I feel like he's very underpriced considering what happened yesterday. They're on a back-to-back. I know Talbot hasn't been great to start the season, but at that price, you definitely got to have some exposure to him in GPPs. On the Chicago side, if you want to use the Taze line, they're expensive. I kind of just want to fade the Blackhawks tonight based off they didn't play well last night. They're on a back-to-back. I think there's better spots tonight. Both Seabrook and Keith were -4s last night. That matters in, DraftKings scoring. But I really, my interest is minimal in the Blackhawks tonight. So let's move on to the next game of the night. We have the St. Louis Blues traveling to Colorado to face the Avalanche. St. Louis back-to-back on the road, but they won last night 5-2 in Chicago. For me, I like to avoid teams on a back-to-back who are on the road. And I think, you want to use Tarasenko as a one-off. You can go for it. I mean, he's Tarasenko. He's up there with one of the better players in the NHL. If they weren't on a back-to-back, I'd have a ton of St. Louis won tonight. Stasny, Tarasenko, and Steen. I still might. The Avalanche have been terrible. They're coming back down to earth after their road trip. They're definitely better options in my mind just because back-to-back on the road, but they're definitely one of the better lines playing tonight as a whole. I'll temper my ownership of them just because of what I mentioned before, but if you can fit Pietro in at 6,700, go ahead. Pyarko is 4,400 again, so you can go there. Colorado is interesting play to me. I believe Carter Hutton's probably going to start 7,600. Oh, and Bernier starting for the Avs tonight, 7,000. It's cheap. If you're not using St. Louis and you want a low-owned leverage play, GPPs, you can take a flyer there, but I'll probably fade him. Colorado, looks like Tyson Yost is up to the top line, 3,300 with McKinnon. Their lines are cheap, and if you're going to use, Dallas or Edmonton or any of those, Tampa Bay, if you're going to use the expensive stacks and you want to, full stack them and you want to use a second full line, I mean, the Avs are a pretty solid landing spot. Duchesne is 4,700. Rantanen's 4,400. Yakupov 4,300. Sven Andrighetto 4,300. Kerfoot's 3,800. I mean, you can use the Avs lines and still fit in. Again, it remains to be seen how they bounce back after the road trip. They played pretty good at home the first few games of the season. Also on the road, they beat the Rangers, to start the season. You want some McKinnon exposure, sure. I think that'd be the preferred line for McKinnon, Andrighetto, and Yost. If you're going to go there. If you can fit, Tyson Barrie, go for it, 5,000. Eric Johnson, 4,100, also viable because he blocks a ton of shots. Again, no interest in Bernier. Let's move on to the second to last game of the night. We have the Carolina Hurricanes traveling to Calgary to face the Flames. Looks like Jaromir Jagr is up to the top line with Monahan and Gaudreau. Definitely, you definitely want to read 80's line matching article for this game. It really depends. The Hurricanes. I like the Hurricanes, but the problem is they have three lines there that you can use. Their power play is spread out all over the three even strength lines, which is annoying. I wish they would just move, um, Skinner up to the top line and move Justin Williams down, so they can have a top six that you can full stack. Also the positions, two centers, one wing, two wings. Or two centers. It's kind of annoying to stack them. If you want to use the Stahl line, fine. You want to use the Rask line, also a viable option. Justin Falk, 5,300. It's pretty expensive. I'd probably go Jacob Slavin, 3,700. If you're going to use the Hurricanes, it all depends really who the 3M line, Frolik, Backlund, and Kachuk face. Whoever they're facing, I want to fade for the Hurricanes, making the other two lines in play. You just check out 80's article. On the Flames side, I don't really have too much interest in them tonight. If they burn me, they burn me. Yager is still really cheap, but Gaudreau 7,200. It's really expensive. Monahan 6,400. That's pretty expensive. The 3M line, they're cheap, but they're again, they have a tremendous amount of defensive responsibilities. They start a lot of their time on ice in the defensive zone. I'm probably going to fade the Flames tonight. Mike Smith, 7,900. If you're not using Canes, I can see it as potentially a GPP play. Not one of my favorite plays. Darling at 7,000. Definitely have interest in him. Only 7,000. I'm not too high on the Flames tonight. I think Carolina's going to win this game. I definitely prefer Darling in GPPs. So let's move on to the last game of the night. We have the Dallas Stars facing the Arizona Coyotes. Dallas won. I feel like people are going to go right back to the well with them, and why not? The problem is they're super expensive. They're over $21,000 to stack on DraftKings. You're going to have to get real creative to, fill out your lineup. There's ways to do it. You're going to have to use like a depth line like Arizona 2, St. Louis 3. Okay, go ahead. Sagan is 7,900. Jamie Benn 7,300. Radulov is 6,200. You want to go right back there and use them? Go for it. They're going to probably command the highest ownership of the night. Radulov probably will be the lowest owned of the three. If you want to full stack them, I don't know how possible. I mean, it's if you missed the info on the Columbus game, once I'm done with the live feed, you can just reload the video. It's up at the beginning. Yes, I do like Columbus one. Columbus one, definitely one of my top plays tonight. If you're using the top line for the Stars, I don't know how. It's almost pretty impossible to put in Klingberg too. You're probably gonna have to go defense elsewhere unless you want to use, like Lindell at 3,400 or Johns at 3,000. I don't really have too much interest in the depth lines. Even Spezza is only 4,100. He hasn't been seeing too much time on the ice. 5-on-5. He does get power play time, but I'd probably avoid them. Hansel is back in Arizona, revenge game narrative. He's 3,900, but he's on the third line. Doesn't really interest me too much. The Derek Stepan line for the Yotes will be all over Dallas one, so I really don't have too much interest in that line, but the second line kind of interests me. They're very cheap. Christian Dvorak, Anthony Duclair, and Keller. If you need to save some salary, you know, they're going to get a depth line of Dallas. Bishop has been good, but if you know, maybe it's my brain with, you know, being biased, but I remember, you know, the past few years when Dallas went into Arizona, they just got wrecked possession-wise. Granted, Martin Hansel was their best defensive center then. He's now on the Stars. I'm not sure Derek is on that level, but I feel like, you know, Coyotes may be competitive in this game. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is an interesting choice on the blue line. He's down in price to 4,500. I think you got to, you know, you're going to have a little exposure to the Coyotes. You got to roll out him while he's still so cheap. Goligoski is 3,200. That's really cheap. Jason Demers is only 3,000. I like him if you're using Coyotes. In net, you know, Ben Bishop 8,400. That's incredibly expensive. You want to use them in cash. Shore's probably got a pretty high floor. Used them in cash the other night. GPP. If you're using Stars, it's going to be really hard to fit Ben Bishop. I think you got to go for one of the cheaper options. If you're you know, not using the expensive lines, and you want to use Ben Bishop, sure, in a GPP, go ahead. Aiden Hill, back in net again for the Coyotes. He did pretty well last game, 6,700. Moderate to no interest. I don't really have too much interest in him. I think, you know, with Talbot 7,100, Darling at 7,000, Rene 7,300. I mean, there's no real need to go down to Aiden Hill at 6,700. So make sure you check out Daily Faceoff for the line combos, all that stuff. AD's line matching article. We have the optimizer. We have projections. We have the chat that I'll be in tonight. So make sure you check that out. I will be back tomorrow. Not sure if AD is going to be with me or not. If not, I'll just ride solo like I have been this week. So make sure to check that out. Thanks, guys. Good luck tonight. Hope you guys win some money. And we'll see you tomorrow.